Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring what is honestly one of art history's most fascinating survival stories, the Patna Kalam School of Painting. We're going to look at how a truly devastating loss of royal support actually gave birth to one of the most vivid, beautiful, and absolutely vital visual records of ordinary 19th century life.
So, what exactly happens when royal artists lose their kings? You'd think it would be game over, right? But what's really interesting here is that it forces us to see how a catastrophic loss of elite patronage didn't destroy these artists. Actually, scratch that. It forced a brilliant adaptation. Imagine being at the absolute pinnacle of your career, painting for the most powerful emperors in the world, and then suddenly, the money and the interest just completely dry up. That is exactly what happened to the master artists of the Mughal court.
The unexpected answer to that massive survival challenge? The Patna Kalam. In this explainer, we'll cover their escape from the courts, how they painted the common man, the masterclass of the Kajli Seahi technique, their seasonal toolkit, and finally, their fading legacy and modern revival.
Okay, Section 1, Escape from Mughal Courts. Our story kicks off way back in 1658, during the reign of the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. The thing about Aurangzeb was he had a very well-documented dislike for figural art, which led to a massive cutback in royal patronage. So these highly trained, incredibly skilled court artists literally had to pack up and leave Delhi. They migrated east to Murshidabad, finding some temporary support under local nawabs. But when that political and economic stability crumbled by the late 1750s, they were displaced all over again. Eventually, around 1760, they put down roots in Patna, which was this booming administrative and trading hub at the time.
Moving on to Section 2, Painting the Common Man.
To survive in Patna, these displaced artists had to execute a radical pivot to appeal to a totally new market of local elites and British East India Company officials. Just look at this stark contrast between their past and present. On one hand, you have traditional Mughal court art, idealized sovereigns, super rich jewel-toned palettes, and these elaborately decorated borders just dripping with royal power. But then, on the other hand, you have the Patna Kalam style. The artist entirely stripped away the intricate backgrounds, leaving them totally plain. They shifted to a muted, earthy palette of deep sepia and ochre. And this wasn't just some artsy aesthetic choice, it was pure commercial economy. Blank backgrounds saved precious time and money for artists who were now basically mass-producing art for an exportable colonial-era market.
And who were they painting? It's literally like looking at a 19th century documentary Instagram feed. They were capturing an unprecedented, everyday occupational variety that the old court painters would have completely ignored. Suddenly, the subjects weren't kings on thrones. They were fish sellers, blacksmiths, grocers weighing pulses, and water carriers hauling these heavy goatskin bags. They painted the vibrant chaos of local festivals like Dasera and Chauth. Because they needed to sell to British officials and merchants who wanted exotic souvenirs of Indian life, these painters inadvertently created one of the only sustained visual archives of the Indian working class from this entire era. Section 3, the Kajli Seahi technique. To mass-produce these vernacular scenes, they simplified their craft, relying on highly disciplined step-by-step techniques. Let me translate this art jargon for you. Kajli Seahi literally means black ink, but in practice, it meant no sketch inking. Because these artists were painting tiny miniatures and needed to work really fast, they skipped the underdrawing entirely. Absolute, flawless perfection was required on the very first brushstroke. No erasing, no do-overs. If you messed up on a tiny piece of mica or paper, the whole thing was ruined. It's a breathtaking high-stakes challenge that proves they absolutely never lost that royal-level manual control. Alongside the Kajli Seahi, they used what's known as the Java style. It's called that because the technique resembled tiny grains of barley. Without the flat color planes used in older Mughal art, they needed a totally new way to create shadow and volume. So they used stippling, these tiny, painstaking accumulations of colored dots right over the unsketched ink. This gave the figures a natural, three-dimensional weight that really appealed to the European tastes of their new buyers. Section 4, the Seasonal Artist Toolkit. This part is so cool. Let's look at how the intense Indian climate actually dictated when and how these artists worked. Production was a fully integrated household economy tied directly to agriculture. A single painting could take nearly a full year to maneuver through the Gangetic Plains seasons. During the monsoon rains, the heavy moisture suppressed all the ambient dust in the air, making it the absolute perfect time to prepare clean, uncontaminated pigments. During the blazing summer, they would dry the works. And finally, in the winter, when the humidity dropped, they applied the colors because that crisp, dry air allowed the paint to adhere better and helped with rendering those delicate stippled shadows. And even though they left the grand Mughal courts, they kept those incredible, self-sufficient traditions of the old royal ateliers alive. They didn't just pop down to an art supply store. They made their own paints from indigenous mineral earths, plant extracts, and even fruit juices. They crafted their own brushes, specifically preferring squirrel tail hair because it held a remarkably fine point. For the absolute finest details, they sometimes reduced a brush down to a single animal hair. I mean, the dedication to the craft was just absolute.
Which brings us to Section 5, Fading Legacy and Revival.
You're probably wondering, how does something this incredible and deeply rooted just disappear? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was more like an avalanche of modernization. First, technology struck. In 1861, a lithograph press opened in Gulzar Bagh, mechanically churning out the exact scenes these artists painted by hand, drastically undercutting their prices. Then came the camera, which basically erased the need for hand-painted visual documentation overnight. Add to that the permanent loss of their patron base when the British left after India's independence in 1947. And finally, there was a tragic institutional failure. No formal training academy was ever set up to pass these specific techniques down to the next generation.
Art historian Mildred Archer really hits the nail on the head with this quote. She perfectly captures why this whole story matters. Patna Kalam wasn't just a survival tactic for displaced artists. It was a unique bridge capturing the highly complex fusion of two vastly different worlds. It was Indian technique meeting European demand, resulting in a priceless window into the daily lives of everyday working-class people who would have otherwise been completely lost to history.
Sadly, the last fully trained master of this specific school passed away back in 1949. But that's actually not the end of the story. Recent grassroots and institutional efforts between 2023 and 2026 are fighting hard to bring it back. Organizations like Intac are running workshops to train new artists right now. The Bihar Museum featured it in their Biennale and hosted a massive exhibition to reintroduce the city to its own heritage. And, perhaps most excitingly, designers are adapting these historic, working-class motifs onto modern textiles using block printing. They're finding a brand new commercial avenue for these ancient visuals. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Patna Kalam was born from a sudden, catastrophic shift in the world, and it survived by slowing down, focusing on the details of daily life, and adapting. But a single miniature takes days of exacting, quiet focus. Will the peace and sustained attention required for this single hair brushwork ever find a permanent, self-sustaining place in our rapid, screen-obsessed modern lives? That is the real test for the future of Patna Kalam. Keep exploring, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.